The Johnson family had always been the picture of suburban normalcy. Nestled in a quiet neighborhood, their two-story home with its white picket fence and well-tended garden seemed like the epitome of stability. But behind closed doors, cracks were beginning to show. David Johnson, the patriarch, had been struggling with mounting debts from a failed business venture. His wife, Linda, had grown distant, spending more time at work and less time with their two teenage children, Dana and Michael. The tension in the house was palpable, though no one outside the family could have guessed the horrors that were about to unfold. It started with an argument, a loud, venomous fight that echoed through the house late one night. Neighbors later recalled hearing raised voices, but no one thought much of it. The Johnsons had always been private, and arguments, while rare, weren't unheard of. But this fight was different. David had discovered that Linda had been secretly siphoning money from their joint savings account, a desperate attempt to secure her own financial independence. Enraged, David accused her of betrayal while Linda fired back, blaming his poor decisions for their financial ruin. The shouting escalated, and then suddenly, it stopped. The next morning, the house was eerily silent. The silence was unnatural, almost suffocating. The usual sounds of the household, the clatter of dishes, the hum of the television, the occasional laughter, were absent. Even the dog, a golden retriever named Max, who usually barked at the slightest noise, seemed subdued, whimpering softly in his corner. The curtains were drawn, and the front door remained closed, a stark contrast to the Johnsons' usual routine of starting the day with open windows and fresh air. Neighbors began to notice the unusual stillness as the morning wore on. Mrs. Thompson, from across the street, who often exchanged pleasantries with Linda over the fence, found it odd that no one had come out to collect the newspaper. By mid-morning, the mailman had left a stack of letters in the mailbox, but no one came to retrieve them. The house, once a symbol of warmth and vitality, now seemed like a hollow shell, its emptiness radiating a sense of foreboding. As the day progressed, the silence grew heavier, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for someone to break the spell. But no one did. The Johnsons, who had always been so present in the neighborhood, had vanished into the shadows of their own home, leaving behind only questions and an unsettling quiet that no one could ignore. When Dana didn't show up for school and Linda missed an important meeting at work, concerned friends began to call. By midday, the police were at the Johnson residence. What they found inside was a scene of unimaginable horror. David lay slumped in the living room, a gunshot wound to his head. In the kitchen, Linda's lifeless body was sprawled on the floor, multiple stab wounds to her chest. Upstairs, Dana was found in her bedroom, her throat slit. The only survivor was Michael, who had been staying at a friend's house that night. He returned home to find his family gone and his life shattered. As investigators pieced together the events of that fateful night, a chilling narrative emerged. David, in a fit of rage, had shot Linda during their argument. Overwhelmed by guilt and despair, he had then turned the gun on himself. But Dana's murder remained a mystery. There were no signs of forced entry, and the weapon used to kill her, a kitchen knife, had been wiped clean of fingerprints. The police began to suspect that Michael, the sole survivor, might have been involved. Friends and neighbors were quick to defend him, describing him as a quiet, kind-hearted boy who adored his sister. But as the investigation deepened, dark secrets about the Johnson family began to surface. Detectives discovered that Dana had been secretly seeing a therapist for severe depression, a fact her parents had kept hidden. Her journal, found tucked under her mattress, revealed pages of anguish and despair, detailing her struggles with feelings of worthlessness and her fear of being a burden to her family. The entries painted a picture of a girl who felt trapped, her cries for help going unnoticed or ignored. Further digging uncovered financial records showing that Linda had been planning to leave David, setting aside money for a fresh start. David's business failures had driven a wedge between them, and their marriage had become a battleground of resentment and blame. The tension in the household had been simmering for months, if not years, and the argument that night had been the final, catastrophic eruption. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, the investigators realized that the tragedy was not just a sudden outburst of violence, but the culmination of a long, painful unraveling. The Johnsons, once a seemingly perfect family, had been hiding, cracks that ran far deeper than anyone could have imagined. Michael's confession came after days of intense interrogation. He admitted to killing Dana, but his explanation was far from what anyone expected. He revealed that Dana had been struggling with severe depression for years, a fact the family had kept hidden from everyone. That night, after witnessing the violent fight between their parents, Dana had confided in Michael, telling him she couldn't bear the pain anymore. She begged him to help her end her suffering. In a moment of panic and misguided love, Michael had grabbed a knife and killed his sister, believing it was the only way to free her from her torment. The aftermath of the tragedy sent shockwaves through the community. Michael was charged with second-degree murder, but the case sparked a heated debate about mental health, familial responsibility, and the limits of compassion. Some saw Michael as a victim himself, a young man pushed to the edge by a family in crisis. Others viewed him as a cold-blooded killer who had taken advantage of his sister's vulnerability. The trial was a media sensation, with every detail of the Johnson family's private life dissected in public. In the end, Michael was sentenced to 15 years in prison, a verdict that left no one satisfied. The once quiet neighborhood where the Johnsons had lived became a place of whispered rumors and uneasy glances. The house itself stood as a grim reminder of the tragedy, eventually falling into disrepair before being demolished. For Michael, life behind bars was a daily struggle with guilt and regret. He often wondered if there had been another way, if he could have saved his sister without resorting to such a drastic act. Years later, as Michael sat in his prison cell, he received a letter from a former neighbor. It contained a photo of the Johnson family, taken during happier times. In the picture, they were smiling, their arms around each other, a family united. Michael wept as he held the photo, remembering the love they had once shared. He realized that the tragedy had not just taken his family from him, it had taken his future, his innocence, and his sense of self. The story of the Johnson family became a cautionary tale, a reminder of how quickly lives can unravel when secrets, lies, and unchecked emotions are left to fester. For those who knew them, the memory of that fateful night lingered like a shadow, a haunting reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating consequences of despair. And for Michael, the weight of his actions would remain with him forever, a burden he would carry long after his sentence was served. In the end, the triple murder in the Johnson family was not just a story of violence and loss. It was a story of love, pain and the tragic choices that can arise when a family is pushed to the brink. It was a story that left no winners, only shattered lives and unanswered questions, a grim testament to the complexities of the human heart.